All right, UFC Atlantic City, a very fun card in certain aspects, but also a very weird and controversial one on the other hand. Let's get into the biggest takeaways. Starting with the main event, Blanchfield versus Fiorot. Now, going into this fight, a lot of stakes. Winner's probably going to get the next shot at the title, so you think, but then you have to remember Valentina Shevchenko is fighting Alexa Grasso, and depending on the result, maybe they'll fight again. So it still is a kind of weird situation that division is in right now. But granted, this is supposed to be like a title contender type of spot, and it's an important fight for both women. Now, if you were told this fight was majority on the feet, you would have thought that it's probably going to be a really good fight, because if it's not going on the ground, there's not a lot of stalling, and they're just standing up, it's probably going to be a dogfight, but sadly, that just wasn't the case. Blanchfield had one real chance on Fiorot, and it was that guillotine attempt that started from a Fiorot mistake, and after that, it was just one-sided the whole way through, and it was frustrating even to watch because you know Blanchfield was trying to walk forward and go at Fiorot the entire time, but Fiorot just did such a good job at maintaining distance and picking Blanchfield apart. And there were some moments where Blanchfield lands a good shot, but then she just wasn't able to keep going with that momentum. But even when they did finally get in the clinch, Blanchfield's strength wasn't a factor because Fiorot was just simply stronger than her. And it was such a big factor because usually Blanchfield, if she can get a hold of you, she's able to use her strength to kind of power you down, but she just wasn't able to do that with Fiorot. And on the striking side, it was just not a match at all. Now, I know it wasn't a great fight to watch, and a lot of people were complaining about Fiorot because Blanchfield was at least trying to press the action, and Fiorot wasn't. But at the end of the day, when Fiorot's outclassing Blanchfield that much, you know, why would she put herself in danger? But nonetheless, it wasn't fun and wasn't a good ending stamp to put on the event. In terms of what's next, Fiorot's probably just going to wait for a title shot, but it really depends what's going to happen with Valentina and Grasso. Like, we don't know what they're going to do after that. Now, she either has to wait a long time or just take another fight. In terms of Blanchfield, she has options. You know, Macy Barber, that could be a good matchup, and Rose Namajunas. They've been going back and forth. That could be an intriguing matchup as well. All right, now we go to Luque versus Buckley, and the craziest part about this fight was before the fight, hours ago, like 8 hours before the fight, I see a video come out, and it's Buckley partying at a pool. Like, I'm like, what is going on? First of all, what are you doing there? Second of all, why are you just going crazy partying when there's a fight? Like I'm literally watching the event, and I look at my phone like during a break, and I look at Twitter, and I see Buckley partying. I'm like, is this today? I literally checked the company's Instagram. They literally posted it the day of the fight, him partying there. He's like, oh, he just showed up. I was like, what the hell? But at the same time, if you look at the video, it kind of just seems that he just was walking by and saw the music and the people and just kind of wanted to jump around for a little bit and then go to the event. You know, that probably was the case, but it was still just wild to see. That being said, that was probably the most exciting thing that happened that day with Buckley because the fight was fairly pedestrian for most of it. And then we get to the finish, and it comes off of Luque pulling guard, and then he's wailing on him with punches, but Luque is actually, it seems like he's blocking most of it. It's not like Buckley's landing a bunch of clean shots and he's hurting Luque bad. And of course they stopped the fight because Luque was just there like this and not moving. But, you know, it seemed more like Luque, I don't want to say giving up, but him just kind of weltering to the pressure rather than actually him being, you know, hurt by Buckley. It was a really weird stoppage, and it made a lot of people question, like, what the hell just happened? People are saying, you know, rigged or he quit and stuff like that. And maybe it was just a psychological thing for Luque. Something happened that week or that day. He just wasn't in it. And, you know, we've seen stuff like that happen in fighting. So that probably, you know, that could be the case. But it was somewhat disappointing for a fight that you expected to be a lot better than that. But that being said, it was still a huge moment for Buckley. He's now in the top 15, and he was clearly, you know, emotional about it because it meant a lot to him. And I was surprised because after the fight, I really thought he'd be, you know, have a name in mind to call out and go at next, especially it's something that you wanted so bad. You got into that top 15. You know, I thought that he'd be like, okay, I've been thinking about this for a while. Like, I've wanted this for a while. And now this is the guy I'm going to call out when I get this win. And he didn't have that. And it was interesting because maybe he doesn't want to start beefs or anything like not forced. Maybe that's where it came from. But usually, like, that's the best time to make a call out was right after your win because everyone's paying attention and it kind of puts like a fight in people's minds and it could get the ball rolling. But he didn't do that. He just called out a specific location that he wanted, and fair play to him. And honestly, I think that could happen. He could take that St. Louis card because it's not looking that great. If he wants to main event it, I wouldn't be mad at that. All right, now we go to probably the most controversial fight of the night, which was Weidman versus Bruno Silva. For Weidman, this was a big fight for him because he really wants to get back on that win column, especially after that gruesome injury that he suffered. And going into this first round, he really looked rejuvenated, motivated, and just on point. Then later into the fight, things are getting more back and forth, and this is where the eye poke stuff starts happening. Throughout the fight, Weidman kept having his fingers out like this. And that's the thing that refs tell you all the time not to do. And it leads to the first eye poke. Then we get apparently a double eye poke, which I honestly didn't think it was a double eye poke. I think it was just another Weidman eye poke. And again, it's stemming from Bruno Silva coming forward and Weidman sticking his arm out with his fingers like this. And the ref even warned him to stop doing that, and he didn't. At this point, the ref should have gave Weidman a harsh warning, taken a point away, do something, because it's like, you're doing the thing that's leading to these eye pokes and you have to stop, and you're not. Then lo and behold, the finishing move was Weidman sticking his hand out just like that again. When Bruno Silva is coming in, Bruno Silva gets jabbed in the eye bad, and of course he's going to go down, and then the fight's over, but they call it a finish initially for Weidman. And ultimately, yes, they did end up making a decision for Weidman because they scored the fight up until that point. To me, that's still not the right justice, because Weidman was doing the same thing, was warned about it, kept doing this again, and it wasn't stopping, and it kept poking Bruno Silva in the eye. And it clearly affected Silva, so to then score the fight up until that point, to me, isn't the best solution. Yes, of course, it's an accident and it sucks for both guys, but at the end of the day, one guy was doing that one thing over and over, and then he ends up getting rewarded for it. And then Weidman blaming Silva for dropping to the ground instead of turning to the ref and covering his eye and trying to get him to understand, like, that's not Silva's job. He got hit with a bad eye shot. That was just his natural reaction. How are you going to blame him for falling after that? And if you look at the previous fight, Dumas was looking at the ref, trying to tell him it was an eye poke, and the ref still didn't grant him that. So it's not like if Bruno Silva was complaining at the ref, it would have made any difference. At the end of the day, I just don't think that's the best solution, just because the guy who's eye poking is just getting rewarded. You know, let me know what you guys think about that. You know, I'm just still so iffy on it. And it sucks because it was a big moment for Weidman. He gets that win. It's a huge, the crowd is loving it. And he did end up getting that moment ultimately, like live in person, because they ended up changing everything afterwards. But nonetheless, he gets his win. It's a big comeback for Weidman. And he did look good. Like, Weidman looked great. He was performing phenomenally. He was doing a good job. It was just a great comeback performance for Weidman. It was just that one thing, and it was just frustrating to see because he just kept doing it. He wasn't stopping. All right, then we go to the previous fight, Dumas versus Ruziboev. And it's just another controversial situation. And going to this fight, Dumas was kind of on a roll, and this was, in terms of his personal life and professionally, a big resurgence opportunity for him. Starting off, Ruziboev is looking fantastic, and then quickly we get into the finish, which gets kind of skewed by an eye poke / cut near the eye, which messes with Dumas, and then he's looking at the ref again. This is what Weidman said. Oh, why don't you just look at the ref and tell him that you have an eye poke? Well, the reason is because Dumas looks at the ref, tell him he has his eye poked, and then Ruziboev is coming at him right away without him looking and just clocks him and finishes the fight. And look, it goes both ways. Of course, you're not supposed to get eye poked, but at the same time, Dumas, you cannot be turning your back and looking at the ref, trying to talk to him for a while when you have a guy who's trying to kill you right there. And then we end up with this feeling that it's just unresolved. And it's weird because why can't we look at the replay for the Weidman fight, but then we don't look at the replay and change the result for the Dumas fight? But that being said, from what we saw, Ruziboev looked fantastic. And, I am looking forward to seeing what he does next, but it just sucks the way it played out. Next up, another fight a lot of people were complaining about, Bill Algeo versus Kyle Nelson. And before the finish, this fight was phenomenal. Both guys back and forth, swinging bombs, going at each other. And then Nelson clips Algeo with a nasty shot that has him with the chicken legs, the Bambi legs, wobbling like crazy. And I thought, okay, it might be over right here. And then Algeo is still kind of in it, holding on to Nelson, holding on for dear life. And then Nelson is just throwing like crazy, trying to hit him a couple more times, then clips him. Algeo starts wobbling again. And this is when the ref was like, okay, I'm going to stop it. And a lot of people were mad at this because Algeo was still standing up. He was still standing. But for me personally, honestly, when I was watching, I didn't think it was a bad stoppage. He was on wobbly, shaky legs, looked out of it 2 times on 2 separate occasions. The first one that got him, he was wobbling a lot. And then I'm like, okay, let's see what he does. And the ref gave him a chance. And then he gets clipped again. And he's doing that shake and wobble again, looking the other way. He was looking to the side with his hand out like this. And I understood where the ref was coming from. But I also understand the fans and Algeo for being like, the type of guy that this is, the fighter that this is, he's still standing up. Let's see him, drop down or whatever. But ultimately, we've seen refs do stoppages like this all the time. But the problem is there's been inconsistencies in these stoppages. We've seen times where, Bobby Green, he's getting wailed on for like 30 minutes and he's literally knocked out, still taking punches and the ref's not stopping it. And then we've seen times where the guy doesn't really seem out and in championship fights and the ref stops it still. But I've also seen people before, when I'm complaining about an early stoppage, people are like, what do you expect? The ref's not supposed to just let them get, flat on their face, knocked out every time, asleep. And I'm like, all right, so it goes both ways. But all that being said, I don't think we're going to see consistent TKO stoppages because it is partly, subjective, right? Like, is he, do they think he's out on his feet? Is he on the ground and still holding on in some sort of way? Is he defending himself? It's kind of up to the referee's discretion sometimes. But in terms of this ref doing his job, he didn't do it wrong. All right, then we go to Nate the Trainer versus Jamal Emmers, and Nate is crazy. Like, he is bona fide nuts. He gets clipped, cut, and hurt badly early in the fight, and I'm thinking, oh my God, are you kidding me? We're all hyped to see Nate the Train. He comes in, and then within like less than a minute, less than 30 seconds, he's out of there. Are you kidding me? And then he stays alive. He stays around and gets Emmers back, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, are you kidding me? And you're especially worried because Emmers against Bazookia, when they fought, he finished him super early with some bombs, and now you're thinking this is gonna be the same thing all over again. But Nate the Train is different, baby. He is a dog, a monster, and he was not getting out of there without a proper fight, without getting his get back, and he ends up finishing the fight. And it was just so fun to see, and the crowd just erupted. That was probably the loudest they were for that entire night, and I don't blame them. Then going into the post-fight speech, just spewing some craziness, talking about his bicep. He's like, "It's Nate the Train here, baby. Nate the Train, the UFC. What do you expect?" Like, all this, it was just phenomenal. It was just exactly what we needed in this card, in this arena. And then especially with what followed that, it's like, at least good thing we had that. Like, at least we had that. Like, man. And it just reminds me why certain guys have to fight in front of fans. A guy like Nate needs to be fighting in front of thousands of people. Imagine him doing that speech with an empty Apex arena. It's not going to happen. Then we go to Aslan versus Turkalj, and this was a fun story because Aslan undefeated except for one guy, which was Turkalj, and he was looking to get that revenge tonight. And the fight itself was fairly entertaining. A lot of heavy swings being thrown, and you're just like, holy crap, at any moment someone could get hit with that bomb and it could end the fight. But as the fight was going on, Aslan was starting to get the better of Turkalj. And I was interested to kind of listen to the commentary. They were talking about Aslan getting, sloppy and tired. And he probably, of course he was getting tired, but Turkalj was eating some shots, and it wasn't like he was looking a lot better than Aslan throughout the fight. And they were saying, oh, Turkalj looks so like fresh and sharp. And I'm like, and I know Turkalj was more steady with his movement, but Aslan was hitting him with some big shots. And I was wondering, how much more can Turkalj's chin take? And of course, he could only take so much before being wobbled bad with that big shot, that big right hand from Aslan, which ended the fight immediately. I thought it was a great stoppage. Even Turkalj was looking at the ref like, what happened? Because he went down and he had his hands out. He was on his butt, but you could see he was out of it. So great stoppage by the ref and a great win for Aslan, a great redemption story there. And now he can kind of go through his career being like, look, the guy who beat me, I beat him, and everybody else I beat. Aslan seems to be a guy who's going to be really fun to watch coming up in this light heavyweight division, so I'm excited to see him. Then we go to another really weird fight, Petroski versus Malkoun, and it was a very slow fight to start. Not too much happening. I was favoring Petroski a little bit in the fight. And then we go into the second round, and this is where it got really weird. Petroski goes for a takedown. His head bangs against Malkoun's hip. He starts wobbling immediately, falls down. It seems like he messed up his equilibrium. And then the fight was pretty much over right there. And at first you're thinking like, there's no way it was because his head hit his hip, right? Like, there's no way. And then afterwards you get confirmation from other people. His coaches said that it was his head hitting the hip that cut him and it really hurt him. And you're just thinking, there's no way this happened. Petroski, in a sense, literally knocked himself out. Anyways, those are my kind of biggest takeaways and thoughts from UFC Atlantic City. Really weird card. I liked a lot of the stuff early on. And then as the card progressed, especially in the main card, I'm like, man, this is really funky. And I know a lot of people were upset. They did not like the stoppages. I wasn't mad at the Algeo stoppage. Let me know what you guys think about the controversy from that stoppage, the eye poke. I think a lot of things tainted this card, and it could have been phenomenal. I think people are just mad at the way things ended. But again, talk to me. Let me know what you guys think. Appreciate you guys always. Peace out.